As I told you, a lot of times we use terms like errors, faults, bugs, defects, failures. These are all variety of terminology that we encounter as we participate in testing projects. But very often, lot of test engineers, even test engineers with a lot of experience, they get confused with these terminologies. They misunderstand, or they understand as if error and defect are same. And similarly, error and failure are same. As a professional tester, you must understand the subtle differences between these terminologies. So we'll talk about that aspect now. So what is an error? What is defect, bug, fault, and what is a failure? So error is different from defect, bug, or fault. Or in other words, fault, defect, bug mean same, but error and defect, bug, fault are not same. Similarly, failure is different than bug, defect, fault. And bug, defect, fault are different from error. So let us understand clearly what these terms mean. So what is an error? Error is a mistake, a human action that produces an incorrect result. That is how we define an error. In fact, the root cause for software defects and also the root cause for failures of software is actually error. People, while developing software, they make mistakes, and these mistakes are called errors. Like you misunderstood a requirement and wrongly defined a requirement. That is a mistake committed by a business analyst, and that can lead to a lot of defective coding, and those defects, if they are not found fixed before it goes to end usage, they can lead to a lot of failures. So error, keep it in mind, is a human action that produces an incorrect result, or people making mistakes is called error. And errors are the root cause of software defects as well as software failures. Now let us understand why actually people make mistakes. What may be the reasons why people make mistakes? It is, first is skill issue. The people who are developing software, they have some skills but may not be fully perfect. That is why they make mistakes. Or sometimes under time pressure, also people tend to make mistakes. And also whenever we are dealing with complex situations, again we human beings, even experienced developers, experienced business analysts also make mistakes. So error is a human action that produces an incorrect result. So what are the examples? Examples are a business analyst misinterpreting a user's request for a feature is a typical error. Or a programmer mistyping program code statements. Instead of typing greater than or equal to, mistyped as less than or equal to. That is a mistake committed by a developer while writing the code. Or a designer of system not understanding the requirement statement appropriately. These are typical errors committed by people in the process of developing software. And this is different from defect, fault, or bug. Defect, fault, or bug are same. You don't need to really differentiate between these three terms. They can be used synonymously. So what is a defect? A defect is a flaw that may cause a feature or a component or a system to not perform its required function or perform it incorrectly. So what does it mean? A developer, while developing in a hurry, mistyped instead of greater than or equal to, mistyped less than or equal to, and did not realize that he or she made that mistake or error. Thought everything is fine and handed over the software from development to testing. So what happened? Because of that mistake, a flaw or a defect gotten into this software. With less than or equal to, it may work in some situations, but in some particular situations, it is not going to work. So a defect or a bug or a fault got injected into the software now. Why? Because developer made a mistake. Developer made an error. So the typical examples of defects are an incorrect program code statement. So the right program should have greater than or equal to, but because of this mistake, the program came with less than or equal to. Or an invalid data definition format in the database. So the program is using the data as alphanumeric, but it is kind of in the program, let's say they have coded as integers, but in the database format, it is defined as alphabetic. So there is a mismatch. This is also a mistake in the process of design, can lead to a defective situation in the system. So these are typical examples of defects or bugs or faults. So what test engineers do in the companies, inside the four walls of the company, is to simulate variety of those situations and uncover these potential defects. So once they uncover, once they find defects, then they can report back to the developers so that developers can correct them. All the errors are corrected, and then only once you are confident, give it to the end user. So in a sense, testers try to simulate variety of input situations to the software based on its requirement and uncover these defects so that if they are corrected, a better quality software goes to the end user. Now what is a failure? Now let's say a company has developed the software, a lot of testers have tested it, whatever defects they found and got them fixed, but some defects cannot be found fully. So let's say a software with few defects went to the end user or to the production. So in production, a deviation from expected result of a component or feature or system with respect to its actual results, then we call the software as failed. So a deviation between the expected behavior and actual behavior of a system, we call it as failure. In a sense, defect also is nothing but we are expecting something as per requirement, but actually something else is happening. So, but we talk about defect from a point of view of that when testers in-house simulate all the failure conditions and expose those defects, they will be fixed by developers. But at times, all defects are not exposed by the in-house teams. So a defective software lands in the hands of the end user, and when the end user is operating the software, they may experience this kind of failure behavior. So if you look at it, errors are mistakes committed by people, faults or defects or bugs or state of the software that are caused because of errors committed by people. And if all defects are not found fixed because of these defects, in the end user situation, events like failures can happen. When we are talking about failure event, the system is misbehaving. System is being done. Its actual behavior is different from the expected behavior. The deviation, we call it as failure. So just to quickly understand these terms, let us check your understanding using this simple question. So what you have to do is that there are 8 statements here. So you have to tell whether the statement is a right statement or a wrong statement. So the first statement is an incorrect statement in a requirements document is often caused by human mistake. Yes or no? An incorrect statement in a requirements document is often caused by a human mistake. Yes, it is correct statement. That is how we define mistakes or errors. The second statement says that a defect is also called an error. Yes or no? A defect is also called an error, which is a wrong statement. A defect is the result of an error. A defect is a flaw in the system which was caused by a mistake by a programmer. Okay, so defect and error are not same. The third statement says that bug and fault are synonyms. Yes or no? Bug and fault are, yes, they are synonyms. Bug, fault or defect. Whenever we are using these terms, they are same. The third or fourth statement is design errors can lead to the wrong data stored in a database. Yes or no? If you make a design error, it can lead to the wrong data stored in a database. Yes, if you wrongly define your data, then if that is not realized by programmers or designers, it can lead to a flaw in the system, and because of that flaw, you can store wrong information in the database. So the fourth statement is a right statement. Fifth statement is a coding mistake is one example of a software failure. Yes or no? A coding mistake is one example of a software failure, which is a wrong statement. Mistakes are errors. Errors are not failures. Errors cause flaws in the software, and if these flaws are not found and removed, they may lead to failure events. So that is how the linkage works. But a coding mistake is not an example of a software failure. The sixth statement says an incorrect total in a printed report is an example of an error. An incorrect total in a printed report is an example of an error. Right or wrong? So, what is an incorrect total in a printed report? Where does it happen? When the software is used by the end customer and entered a set of data, processed some information and took a report, and this report, the totals in the report are wrong. This is a failure, and this failure is caused because there is a defect exists in the software, and these defects are caused by errors. So that is not an example of an error. It is an example of a failure. So that is a wrong statement. The seventh one is incorrect logic statement in a program are examples of defects. Instead of a program should have greater than, but the program has less than. So the incorrect logic statement is a flaw in the software. It is an example of a defect. So it is a correct statement. Why this defect is occurring? Because a programmer has mistyped the statement there. So the eighth statement, let us read it. When a system stops unexpectedly, it's called a failure. So the actual behavior of the program and expected service of the program are different. So unexpectedly a program is failing. So that is an example of, or it's called a failure. It is a right statement. So as a professional test engineer, you must understand this terminology. What is error? What is a fault or defect or bug? And what is a failure in a very clear manner, and understand the linkage between these terms. So this is a very important understanding you must develop, and there are a lot of senior test engineers often get confused. So please spend some time and understand this. So let us understand what is the relationship between these errors and to defects, to failures. So in a simplified software life cycle, we all start with requirements, followed by design, followed by programming. Then we give the software to the end user where software gets deployed. So what typically happens during the requirement phase? So requirements, actually they communicate the features and capabilities the user to the users and other stakeholders. When mistakes are made in requirements, then what can happen? The next phase, the design can become flawed. If you make mistakes in requirements, it can lead to defects in design, and that can lead to building a wrong product. So that is why testing activities should begin early in the development life cycle. So what happens in the design? The softwares, what is the purpose of design? The purpose of design is to communicate the overall structure and the technologies that will be employed are usually defined using your system design. So when mistakes take place in the design, those errors can result in coding defects later. And because of these mistakes, you have to redo your design, and also your recoding has to happen because of these mistakes. So followed by programming. So during programming, developers write code and they build the software for execution. When mistakes are made during coding, what happens? Defects in the executable system happen. So these defects need to be found and corrected to avoid failures when the system is deployed. So if you leave a lot of programming defects during programming, then end users during deployment will face the problem. So deployment is the release of the product to the end user. So in addition to failures caused by software defects, some failures that occur during or after deployment are due to environmental conditions that were not anticipated at the time of design. And such conditions, like the program is designed to work with IE browser, but you are operating with Chrome browser. So the environment is different. So the system is not designed to work perfectly in that browser, but an end user is making a mistake of using the program there. So the environmental conditions are sometimes people who are using the system not using it properly. They are making mistakes while how to use the software. Because of that also we experience failures during deployment. So the deployment time, whatever failures happen, they can be the result of poor programming. Because of the defects still occur in the software, because of that in deployment failures are occurring, or sometimes you are using the software in its wrong environment, wrong hardware, then also you can experience failures, or users while using the software are making a lot of mistakes. So that may be also one of the reasons why you can experience failures. Okay, so that is another very important issue you must understand. What happens during the development phase, what errors, if they are not prevented, how they can become flaws in the system, and if these flaws are not found until end users use the software, how failures occur. So let us check your understanding with this topic. So I have a question for you there. So there are 3 terms on the left side and another 3 terms in the right side. So you please think, if mistakes happen on the left side, what next phase that will be affected? So let's say mistakes are done while doing programming. So what it can cause? Which next phase that can be affected? So that is deployment. So if design mistakes are committed, what can it lead to? It can lead to programming flaws. And if requirement time you are making mistakes, it can lead to wrong design. So every life cycle activity, if mistakes are done and they are not corrected at the time of doing it, it can lead to a wrong next phase that can happen. So that is what we have talked about so far. Learn and have fun. Thank you.